Alrighty, good morning everybody. Welcome back, Mustafa. Good morning, Neil. Let's go ahead and take a look at what happened yesterday. There were some pretty good opportunities, if you ask me. Go ahead and swing on back here and take a look. If you guys recall, we were testing the very target I gave you guys to the upside. Remember, we were trading in uncharted territory up here where there's no price action to rely on. And I warned you guys about 58.30 being a strong resistance. Sure enough, they came right to it yesterday, right at the market open. And then, like I warned you, we have a bunch of bearish clues from that level, which would make sense for the market to pull back, right? And that's kind of the setting that brought us here into the open. And as you can see, the market just went ahead and sold off right off the very level that we were aware of. And from there, you can see on the way down here, they did hold. Let's zoom this in a little bit. It's a little small. So they held the back end of the fast moving average here right out of the open. And more importantly, as they sold off, they came up and they tried to get through the holy orange power level, our hopeful. And here's one day, I mean, like I said, it seems to be multiple days a week where they come right to the holy orange power level, and that becomes the major rotational area, either the major low or the major high in the market. And sure enough, if you did fade the back end of the hopeful on the way down, you got yourself a pretty nice little fade all the way down and right down to the very area. Well, guess I gotta zoom it out a little bit more. Right down to the very area I told you would make a lot of sense for the bulls to defend, right? So it was either the previous daily high or 50% of the day before that I told you would make a lot of sense to be a great support zone. So if you did buy the previous daily high, one thing you might have noted if you were watching it and you got in long off the previous daily high is they got rejected off the fast moving average, and then on the little peak below to bounce type of setup with the bullish divergence, it kissed the back end of the FMA and started coming right back. So that should have been a clue if you were long that we were still heavily on the bearish side of things, right? And that's why I teach and use this fast moving average, because it does give me some clues. If I get in a trade and we keep rejecting off of it, well, it's a clue that the bears aren't done in this instance, right? So continued to sell off, eventually held below the previous daily high. You can see it wasn't clean, but the bulls tried to bring it back through, and then sure enough, the bears said, no, we're going back to test 50% of the day before, which was also the previous daily close. It was also right next to our roadmap level, and I believe it was some other retracement on the chart that I talked about. So everything lined up for that area to be a strong support, and sure enough, it worked. It's just it wasn't a nice clean hold to the tick. The first test, now if you were just to buy 50% of the previous day, you got it to the tick with no risk. The only issue is, as you can see, it came right up to the fast moving average and then started coming back down again, right? So that would have been my clue that maybe wasn't a good trade to stay in. And sure enough, it did duck down, well, what about 5 points, and then came back. That second pullback held it, and that launched it back up to finish the day out. Now on the way down, let me scroll back here a little bit. On the way down, it wasn't super clean in the sense that it just held the back end of the 200 the whole merry way down. It did, though, hold that first test after we had failed off the holy orange power level. So there were some good to the tick holds off these areas, right? So holding the fast moving average, holding the back end of the VWAP here, except it doesn't really get very far. So just a scalp, maybe max 3-4 points. Comes back, does hold the back end of the 200 here. If you tried the 200, shouldn't have been stopped out. The only issue is that it only got, let's just say, about 9 points, 8-9 points, and then came back, right? So you could have got a decent scalp off the 200 here. Again, with the type of risk we're talking about is maybe 1 point on the S&P futures. So nearly zero risk. And you did get yourself 5, 6, 7, 8 points. came back, and then there was the real sinker right there, right, where it just came right to it. And there's a reason that level's on there, guys. I see this, we all see it happen over and over again. So beautiful hold from there. And then, like I said, if you stayed on there, you captured the whole sell-off, you know, all the way down from 58.21 all the way down to 50%, which was one of our expected supports. That's 57.83. So you got a pretty decent trade there, well over 20, 30 points, right? And then if you missed out on the Hopel, well, what do you know? Here's our crossover. Here's our first kiss of the 200 with beautiful bearish divergence right off that kiss. And again, 0 ticks of risk on the S&P futures for a trade that could have given you a good 10 points to the downside, right? And you guys know I like 5, I like 10. I would have gotten a decent setup there. And then here's where it was a little more messy, where we didn't get a nice, beautiful tag. And then from there, here's the aggressive move where it just rides the back end of the fast moving average the whole way down. So remember, coming out of the open yesterday, it was all about a potential for the bears to pull back off of our major level. We had signals and we were pulling back off a major level. So if you tried some shorts, you should have had success down into the areas I warned you would be support. And then even later on in the day, once we rejected once again off of the previous daily high, which was an expected support, right? I did tell you this would make sense to see the bulls come down into and then launch off of. But then they got below it, and then we're getting rejections off of it. So when you saw that later on in the day, you did get your opportunity. There's the crossover right there. Let me see if I can bring this in a little bit. Here's your crossover. Here's your first tag of your 200 with major bearish divergence. Look at how extreme the RVI got when we tested it there, right? So beautiful opportunity there. Another beautiful opportunity here with a nice local bearish divergence right off the high. So great opportunities to get short here. And then, like I said, if you did buy 50% of the previous day, well, you did get a decent scalp, although the failure off the fast moving average was a big sign that it wasn't going to work out. And then if you were waiting for the support at the 50% of the previous day, we got our crossover. Unfortunately, the pullback didn't come into the 200. It was just an aggressive push. So we just kept holding the FMA almost all the way up until we found resistance off VWAP. I feel like this is just kind of never ending, same stuff over and over. We get pullbacks off VWAP, support off VWAP, pullbacks off the 200, support off the 200, all day long. So that brings us here to the end of the day where it just petered out, and interestingly enough was chopping back and forth between VWAP and the previous daily high. So again, our roadmap levels are quite literally exactly where we find our trend channels, our chop blocks, and our areas of support and resistance. So that was the end of the day, and then even right at the end of the day there, you got some opportunities to buy the pullbacks to the 200 as it was trying to break back out. So that brings us here into the overnight session where the bulls seem to have regained a little bit of strength and they're trying to come back. Remember yesterday on the pullback, they held 50% of the previous day. This is good stuff for the bulls. And now coming in this morning, we've pushed up to almost test the high the day before again now. So in the overnight session, again, we peak up through VWAP, doesn't quite hold, comes below, and there's your tag of the VWAP on the back end. Last night was a little bit messy in the, what would you call it, the witching hours, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning on the, at least on Central Eastern time here. And now as we come into the open, they've been holding right around the Hopel here to come out. And now we've got the previous daily high, remember 58.30, coming up here in a couple points. So we'll see what happens. We're going to jump up to the higher time frames and see what they have to say for this morning.